What's going on, guys? Johnny here, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about my brand new dancing shoes, my EMAX LS2207 2550 kV motors. Hang with me and let's check them out. Alright guys, so if you know me, you know that I've been racing the Race Day Quads Mach 1 build with ready-made RC Rifle 2206 2550 kV motors. That's this build right here. I've been rocking these motors since I think about May or June, around the time of Flight Fest, and these motors have worked really well for me. When I went out to Nationals, if you follow my videos when I went out to Nationals, you'd see that I brought 4 of these quads all with the same motors. I think I had 8 spare motors. Well, since that time, I've managed to break 5 of these motors. And for that reason, as I'm starting to go down in quantity, I decided to try something else for my primary racing build. Now, these have worked really well. The power is actually really great. On one of my builds, I still have the original motor I tried on this build, which was the LITE 2206 2522 motors. These are also very good motors, but there's a big difference in power between the ready-made RC rifles and the LITEs. The LITEs are a little bit more efficient, but they don't give that same punch that I get with the rifle motors. When I'm racing others with the rifle motors and I give it full throttle and try to go past, very few quads can I not pass with this setup. But at the same time, that comes a little bit of a downside for me, which is the efficiency. And I've noticed that when I'm racing in practice, I get in fewer practice laps than everyone else I race with, or at least almost everyone else I race with. So I want to try something different, not because I don't like these motors. I'd still love to run these, but I figured because I've been breaking so many motors lately, let's try out something else that just came out, these 2207 motors. The brand new EMAX LITE SPEC. It promised to be a relatively light motor, even though it's a little bit larger size. And I'm really curious to see if this is going to provide me the same sort of power, if not more than the ready-made RC rifle motors, while also giving me the same or better efficiency than the rifles. If these can give me the same power with more efficiency, I'm going to be absolutely in love. All right, so let's break this box open. Let's check it out. Let's take a look at it, maybe get a weight on it, compare it to some of the other motors that I usually run, and then get it put on a quad and then put it to the test outside. Let's check it out. All right, so here we go. This is the EMAX LITE SPEC LS2207 2550 kV motors. These are offered in 2 other kV varieties, one a lower, one a higher kV. However, for me, I find that about 2500 turns out to be about the perfect sweet spot for me for performance when it comes to racing motors. So let's break open this packaging and see what we got. All right. So if you're familiar with EMAX packaging, pretty much all their motors come in the same sort of package. I remember when I got my original red bottoms, they were like this. When I got later the 2306 motors, they were like this, and these ones continue in the same fashion. All right, so always get some EMAX stickers. I don't actually put those on anything. Have some nice foam that you can actually use for other purposes, so I do like that. And plus, these containers are actually really nice. I end up reusing these for little bits and pieces. So inside of here, we have some screws made for 3mm arms, as well as some other screws which are probably for 4mm arms. This is really nice. I do run builds with 3mm and 4mm thick arms. A lot of motors that I buy only come with 4mm thick arm screws, so it's nice that they give you this kind of option. Also comes with an extra screw here that you see. This is to replace the screw on the bottom that plugs in the bell. That's a nice little touch you don't get from a lot of different motors, so really nice. Wow. You know, as I take it out of the package for the first time, it actually feels like a pretty hefty motor. I know it says LITE SPEC on it, but it does not feel LITE SPEC in the hand. But then again, the first thing that I notice when I pull it out is the size of these wires. So I did see that this is now the first one running, I think, 18 gauge wire for the motors. Typically they're 20 gauge. I don't totally know why that's necessary. I'd be really curious to know. Especially if you're running separate ESCs. You got to keep in mind that for the amount of current going through, it matters not just the thickness of the gauge of the wire, but also the length. And so if I'm running individual ESCs, it'll only be about, this long. And at that point, I got to think that this sort of wire is kind of overkill. And if you're running, a 4-in-1 ESC, well, at that point, it might actually really help, but it's going to add a lot of weight. So it's kind of interesting. I'm curious to know what the advantages were compared to the ones that everyone else is running with 4-in-1 ESCs, but I will trust EMAX that it's got to be some sort of added efficiency, maybe a reduction in heat, and maybe that's helping. Maybe when I cut these down for individual ESCs, it'll still help out, but I guess we'll see when we test it out. All right, so now that I got this out of the package, I mean, things look good. Typical EMAX to me, really small air gap. Really clean windings. Looks like really fine wire. Looks really good. Feels really nice in the hand. It looks really nice. I'm a big fan of this, the way this product looks. I like kind of the mix of the black and the silver. I'm excited to throw these things on the quad. I'm also a real big fan now about the bottomless design. I only like running bottomless motors if I can. It's easier for me to clean this stuff out of, and it saves a little bit of weight. So I really like that everyone's gone to this sort of design. So now that we got this out, let's take a look at what the weight is. Now, on the back of this package, it does say that it runs 30 grams. Let's see. On the back of this package, it does say weight 30 grams without the silicone wires. That would be pretty light. That would be like in the realm of my Hyperlights. But like I said, this feels really heavy with these wires, so I have to think it's gonna come in a little bit above that weight. All right. Fire up the scale. Alrighty. Slap on this motor. 35.5 grams. That's definitely a bit hefty. Actually, let's take off this here. I think usually when they weigh it, they're not including the prop nut. I don't know what that weighs, but let's just try it without the prop nut. Okay, 34.9 grams. I don't think these are quite 5 gram wires, so it's a little bit heavier than I was expecting. Doesn't quite seem like light spec, but just to check it out, let's compare it to some of the other motors I have that I would typically run and see how it compares to those. So first off, let's compare it to the ready-made RC rifle motors that I'm running on my other builds. So let's break this out here. And so I talked about the difference in wires. This is a typical motor and pretty much the same size I see on every motor. But just look at the difference of these wires here versus the ready-made RC. There's got to be a good reason for this. It's got to be an efficiency thing. With so much power going through these motors, it just must not be quite enough gauge. I'd be really curious to see what the results show with that. All right, but anyway, let's try weighing this one here. I can already feel like these wires are a lot lighter. All right, let's put these down here, get a quick weight on those. 31.6 grams. All right, so that's over a 3 gram difference in weight. That's pretty big. I'm hoping most of that is all in these wires here. It does make sense that they weigh a little bit more because they're pretty much similar construction, yet the EMAX, is a slightly larger stator. It's a 2207 versus the 2206 here, but yeah, that's definitely a big difference. And then just for a quick comparison, let's also take a look at the 2306 EMAX motors. These were actually known as being pretty, relatively heavy motors. Again, that thinner wire, plus these wires are not nearly as long. If we put these on the scale, 34.2 grams. All right, so this is actually weighing a little bit less than the new light spec motor, but like we talked about, these wires have got to be adding a bunch of weight, plus they're a bit longer than these here. So I do think once I trim down the wires, these will actually be lighter, and I do expect them to be more powerful. All right, so this quad here, this is our Race Day Quads Mach 1 build. This is the build that I'm going to be replacing these ready-made RC motors on and replacing with the light spec EMAX 2207 motors. Before we do that, I do want to get an all-up weight on this guy, just for comparison's sake to see how much it changed across all 4 motors. This has been a really, really great build for me. I love racing this around the track. The performance has been fantastic. The only thing I'd really improve is that efficiency. It does tend to die a little bit sooner than some of the other quads I'm racing against, even though I'm not putting up, much better laps. They're about similarly paced laps, but my efficiency just isn't quite as good. All right, so quick rundown the whole build. Race Day Quads Mach 1. We have the ready-made RC rifle 2550 kV motors. We're running the HQ V1S 4.3 props. We got a TBS Triumph antenna on the back, a Immersion RC Tramp for the VTX. We have a Runcam Swift, sorry, not a Runcam Swift, but we have a Runcam Micro Sparrow for our camera. And then inside we're running a XSR receiver with a CL Racing F4 flight controller. Other thing of note is it's also got some LEDs. I really like running LEDs on racers. I kind of wish everybody start running LEDs. It really helps around the track, makes some nice footage. But anyway, let's get these motors swapped out, get the new motors on, and compare. But first, let's just get a quick look at our all-up weight. All right, slap that on there. So we're currently running about 308 grams here with the ready-made RC motors. So with just the wire that we need on there, let's try another weight here for the LITE SPEC 2207 motors. 31.3. So definitely a little bit of extra weight there. Not quite the 30 grams that EMAX was claiming, but still a pretty respectable weight. It turns out that this wire here that we chopped off was actually pretty heavy. So putting back on the wire that we just cut off, 3.6 grams, just an extra wire. So definitely a lot of weight for that extra gauge thickness wire. All right. Anyway, let's go ahead, finish tinning these up and get them installed on the quad. All right, guys, I got all the motors switched out, got the props back on there, about to do the weight comparison. I will say it was definitely actually very difficult to get these things mounted here with these separate ESCs. There was just such small amounts of space to wire in, and because that gauge is actually a lot thicker, it's a lot harder to manage and move around. So that was probably the longest it's ever taken me to swap out some motors. Just something to keep in mind. Probably a little bit better placement of my ESCs from before would have helped, but I was not expecting that. So just want to point that out. It is a little bit more difficult to work with when using individual ESCs with these new motors. They just have such long sleeves, and then the gauge of the wire, like I said, makes it real difficult to work with. Anyway, it's all built back up. Turn on the scale, get a quick weight. So about 312 grams. Sorry, about 315 grams. A little bit heavier than it was with the rifle motors, but not too bad. Hopefully they provide a little bit more punch. Real interested to get this thing out to the field, get it tested out, see how the efficiency works and see how the power works. I still have another build right here where I'm using the rifle motors. So I'll use this one as a comparison, and we'll be able to check out the differences. Anyway, let's take it out to the field and see how she does. Oh man. Winter has struck, guys, but we're out here ready to do our first maiden for these LS2207 motors. My plan for today is basically just to fly lightly around, see about how long it flies for, compare that to the rifle motors, and then just take and kind of rip it around and see roughly how it feels like, give you guys a brief overview of, you know, what it's feeling like to fly them, and kind of compare it to the rifle motors. I don't plan on doing any racetrack testing, seeing how I work around the track today. It's just too cold, honestly. It's just really cold out, but I want to give you the first impression just how they fly. So this is the first maiden. Let's get the battery on it, let's get it up in the air, and hopefully my fingers fall off before the battery dies. We'll see. Also keep in mind that because it is so cold, the battery probably won't perform quite as well as it would on a nice summer day, but just keep that in mind. For this test we're using a China Hobbyline 1500 100C battery. Make sure we use the same battery for both tests just so we get an idea of what difference that has in relative efficiency. Big time oscillations to start. Definitely the power is different on these. I'm barely lifting the throttle to get this thing around. My old motor definitely took more throttle to fly around. It's actually really weird. Hard to maintain my altitude with the stick position where it is. Flying for over 4 minutes here, seems pretty efficient. Probably going to bring it in and check the battery out. But this is pretty encouraging. Very little throttle, seems to go down pretty quick anyway. A little bit of oscillations need to be tuned out, but definitely seems like it might have the efficiency thing down compared to the rifles. But I'm going to try to fly similar to this when I switch over to the rifles and just see how she does. All right, that was 5 minutes of flying. I think the OSD said about 1250, 1300 milliamps, but I'm gonna slap the battery check on there and just see where we landed. All right, so plug it in the battery checker. It reads 373, 15% left. So that's pretty much a fully spent battery. About 5 hours of just cruise, sorry, 5 hours. About 5 minutes of just cruising around. Not too bad just for the straight efficiency. Let's try out the rifle motors. There we go. All right, 5 minutes. All right, plug this one in. 373 exactly. So exact same voltage between the two, running both about 5 minutes. So as far as just cruising around efficiency goes, they seem to be pretty much identical. Now, obviously that's not really where efficiency matters. Usually I'm ripping around a race course and I'm getting about 2.5, 3 minutes at most battery. So it's not quite the same thing. I'm curious to see how it does around a track, but that's interesting to note that it's about the same efficiency just cruising around. But now let's check out its power and punch. Let's put another battery on that. Now let's put another battery on the LS2207, just see about how it feels compared to the rifles. Still oscillates a bit. Push it full throttle. Definitely feels fast here. All right, these things are not lacking for power, that's for sure. About 3 minutes of straight ripping around. Feels pretty solid. Definitely got to get used to it, but felt pretty good. I'm pretty sure this battery is pretty much spent 3 minutes long. All right, go to. All right, so first round of testing, what I'd say is that it didn't seem like it had any more total, top end power. It felt like going full throttle. The rifle actually might have been a little bit more powerful, maybe even pulling a little bit more amps. In total, I flew about 3 minutes for both, pulling pretty hard, and both time batteries were totally spent. So total efficiency felt the same, top end power felt about the same. The real big difference I felt was that the low end power, like where power kicks in on the 2207s, was a lot lower. It took a lot more throttle to get those rifle motors going. I really like the way that works with the rifles, mostly because I'm used to it, I'd say. But what I kind of wonder is maybe what I should do is put a more aggressive prop on the 2207s and the rifles and compare it then. Right now I was testing with the V1S prop, the 4.3. So I do have some 4.8s I can try, and I'm really curious to see what that'll show. My guess is that the 2207 is going to have more torque and it's going to really excel when I put a more aggressive prop on it compared to the rifles. But right now, what I'm noticing is that, basically the 2207 costs $22 and the 2206 rifle costs $25. And they're gonna be pretty similar results, maybe even slightly better with the rifles. So overall though, I don't think you're gonna go wrong with either one, but I do wanna try a more aggressive prop. So, all right, so we're gonna grab some more aggressive props, then we'll come back out to the field, hopefully when it's a little bit warmer, but let's check it out with some more aggressive props. All right, guys, we're back out here outside. It's a little bit warmer than it was before. Still a little bit chilly, but I'm appreciative for that sun. Anyway, I got these props switched out. These are now the V1S 4.8 props. I'm hoping that the combined lower torque with the motors plus these props will make it feel a little bit better. But let's put it to the test and go fly it. In addition to just trying out new props, I also set up a few gates. Lately, because of the last race, I've been working a lot on my split S maneuvers and my quick turnarounds through gates, just trying to improve the way that works. Hopefully I can get more and more confident there, so when it comes to using it within a race, I'm going to see better and better results. Anyway, I'm going to put this to the test out on those gates, and let's see how we fly. All right.
Battery.
Thank you. All right, so that actually felt like a really good combination. I really like the combination, that low end torque with the higher pitch. Just that little, catching out of the split S, the little turnaround, it just felt a little bit more controlled. Definitely needs some more getting used to it. That was a little bit slower than I'm accustomed to doing those maneuvers, but yeah, I'm gonna switch back to the rifle motors just to make sure I'm feeling the right thing. The rifles are still running the 4.3 props. All right, so after I try out the rifles, I'm gonna put through maybe 5 more batteries on these, make sure what I'm feeling is actually correct. But so far, I like these higher pitches on these motors. They seem like a really good combination. I think this might end up being my sweet spot. All right, so that was a pretty short flight. Did some pretty good prop damage here, broke my battery strap, but that was actually feeling really good. That's more like what I'm used to, so definitely gonna put through maybe 4 or 5 batteries on the 2207s and just get a feel for how different it was. I had a couple of rounds that felt more like what I was accustomed to, but would have liked to get more practice on this one. But anyway, let's try out the other. All right, I just broke the last of the 5.8s I had, so I'm actually going to switch over to the Cyclone V2s, the 5046 props, and just try those out real quick. Those used to be my go-to props, but the V1S just felt a little bit smoother. They're not as durable, which kind of stinks, but the smoothness just made it worth it for me around the course. I felt like my turns were crisper, and that's why I made that switch. But let's try out the Cyclones. Oh, wow. I just completely killed that battery. Wow, I just completely killed that battery. That felt really, really good. These things really grip the air so well. It flew amazing, but that battery was completely drained at less than 2.5 minutes. So these things are definitely not efficiency monsters. They probably don't give me better efficiency than the 2206 rifle motors, and that makes sense. I mean, they're a little bit more powerful, but it felt really good flying this thing through the air. Definitely like the Cyclones. The V1S props were probably a little bit more efficient, but man, this just felt so good flying through the air. You could probably see it just looking at the DVR comparing the two, but it felt really, really good. So anyway, what I'd say about these motors is I do like them a lot. I like the way they look. They might be a little bit heavier than I would have hoped for. Running the wires a little bit more work than I liked. It was a little bit hard to work when they get real small close to the ESC. But they are $3 cheaper than the $25 motors, and there's a lot of $25 motors out there, yet they're more powerful. So I like the look, I like the power. Could be a little bit easier to work with there, but overall I really like these motors, so I don't think I'm going to hesitate getting some more. I do plan on trying out some other motors since I broke so many of the rifles, but I would not hesitate to try these motors. I think they'd actually be really, really fantastic freestyle motors, mostly because that added torque as I'm coming back down from dives and maneuvers. I think that would be a really, really nice benefit, so definitely like them for freestyle. Racing's pretty nice. I don't think I'd try the higher kV motors just because how quickly my battery is draining here with the 2550, but maybe I try the lower kV. I don't know. 2500 has always been what I like for racing, so I'm going to stick to that, and I'm just going to finish out my last few batteries, but I wanted to share those thoughts with you about these motors. I like the way they look a lot. I like the power they give. I like the price point compared to the rifles. Overall, I think it's a really good job by EMAX. I am curious about why they use the thicker wires, but I like these things a lot. So anyway, if you're looking for motors, don't hesitate to pick these things up. They are really solid motors. They do work really well, and I think the price point's about right. So hopefully that you found that helpful, and if you did, then please leave me a comment down below. Like this video if it was helpful. Dislike if you disliked it, but just please let me know why. And as always, I'll catch y'all next time. Peace!